You begin the long walk at the hour when the sun has just slipped behind the western mountains, and the whole valley begins to soften into a single muted color. The spirit path stretches ahead of you, a broad stone road laid across the earth with the precision of a calligrapher's line, and your feet find its familiar surface without thought. To either side, the tall cypress trees stand in perfect rows, their dark shapes already losing the fine details of branch and needle as the light drains from the sky. The air is still warm from the day, but carries now the first cool thread of evening, a subtle shift that you feel on your cheeks and the backs of your hands. Above the treetops, the orange band of sunset is thinning to a pale yellow, then to a soft grey blue that will soon become the deeper color of night. Your ceremonial robe moves lightly against your legs as you walk, the cotton fabric worn smooth by many such evening journeys. In your right hand you carry the long spear, its wooden shaft resting on your shoulder with a weight that has become so familiar you no longer notice it, except as a small steady pressure. The bronze tip catches the last light of the sky and holds a tiny orange spark for a moment before it too fades. Your cloth shoes make a soft brushing sound on the flagstones, a quiet rhythm that matches the slowing pace of your breath, and with each step you feel the duties of the daylight world fall further behind you. The tomb mound rises ahead, visible now through the gaps between the cypress trunks. It is a great hill of earth shaped by human hands centuries ago, its slopes covered with grass that in this twilight looks almost black. The mound sits at the center of the wide paved court, and at its base, facing the spirit path directly, is the stone gate, a tall portal sealed with blocks of dressed stone and carved with the guardian figures that protect the emperor's eternal rest. In the remaining light, the carvings show themselves as faint ripples, the coiled dragons and floating clouds just barely catching the glow. The door itself remains in shadow, a dark rectangle set into the base of the mound like an eye already closed for the night. You pass the first pair of stone animals, two lions seated on pedestals with their carved manes smoothed by centuries of wind and rain. Their heads are turned slightly toward the path, as if they are watching your approach, and in the half-light their features have a soft, blurred quality, the deep lines around their mouths and the curves of their ears becoming simple shapes of darker grey. One lion has a missing chip on its left ear, a detail you know from daylight but can no longer see, and instead you see only the whole form, patient and unmoving. Beyond the lions, you pass the horses, their stone necks bent as though they are still pulling an invisible chariot, their tails swept to one side in a gesture of eternal motion that the gathering darkness now freezes into stillness. The elephants come next, massive and round, their trunks curled inward and their small eyes gazing at the ground. You have often thought that the elephants carry a special kind of quiet, a heaviness of stone that makes the silence around them feel even deeper. Tonight Bibolk is just a shape against the sky, a low dark mound on each side of the path that merges with the shadows of the cypress trees. The camels follow, their long necks and humped backs forming a different silhouette, more angular, and beyond them, the stone officials in their flowing robes stand with clasped hands and solemn faces that are now only suggestions of light and shadow. You do not pause to study them, but you feel their presence as you walk, a long line of quiet witnesses lining the road to the emperor's chamber. De brazier stands near the sealed door, a large bronze vessel on 3 legs, filled with oil and fitted with a thick wick that you will light for the night watch. A small stone alcove beside it holds the oil jar and the lighting stick, its tip wrapped in cloth and soaked in resin. When you reach the brazier, you lower your spear and lean it carefully against the doorframe, its shaft resting in a worn groove that generations of guards before you have used for the same purpose. You kneel beside the brazier and lift the heavy lid, the metal cool under your fingers, and the smell of lamp oil rises immediately, sharp and clean, mixing with the dry scent of the stones and the faint sweetness of night-blooming flowers that comes from the garden beyond the outer wall. You strike the flint once, twice, until a spark catches on the resin cloth and a small flame appears, dancing on the end of the stick. You touch it to the main wick, and the brazier's flame comes to life with a soft sound, a low breath of fire that settles into a steady golden point. The light pushes back the darkness a little way, illuminating the carved door behind you, the nearest flagstones, and the closest stone lion, which now seems to lean into the warmth. You rise and carry the lighting stick to the second lamp, a smaller bronze dish set in a niche to the left of the door, and you light that one as well. The two flames burn side by side, their light overlapping in a gentle pool that will be your only company until the sun returns. You take up your spear again and step into your position just to the left of the sealed door, facing outward along the spirit path. Your feet settle onto the cool stones, and you feel the slight unevenness of the flagstones through the thin soles of your shoes, a familiar map of small ridges and dips that your body knows by heart. You adjust your grip on the spear so that its base rests on the ground and its shaft leans against your shoulder, and you let your weight shift until you find the posture of the watch, balanced and still, the same posture the older guard taught you when you first took this duty. The teaching was simple. Let your body become like one of the stone animals, heavy and patient, and let your mind do the same. The valley behind you is emptying of color now, the last warm tones of sunset completely gone, and replaced by a cool gray that deepens with each passing moment. The cypress trees have become a solid wall of darkness, their trunks invisible, their tops blending into the sky. The rows of stone animals are losing their outlines, merging into the general shadow of the path, and the distant hills beyond the valley gate are no longer visible at all. You watch this transformation without urgency, letting your eyes move slowly from one point to the next, noting how the darkness seems to rise from the ground like a slow tide, covering first the lowest stones, then the bases of the statues, then their bodies, then their heads. The flame of the brazier flickers once when a small pocket of oil finds the wick, and then it steadies again, and the circle of light it casts becomes the only world you can see. The air settles into a deeper coolness, and you feel the temperature drop on your face and neck, a gradual change that seems to come from the stones themselves. The smell of dry earth grows stronger as the night moisture begins to gather, and beneath it you can still detect the lamp oil and the faint perfume of the flowers, now more distant. Somewhere in the cypresses a small bird makes a single quiet note, a brief sound that does not repeat, and then the silence returns, fuller than before. You listen to the silence, noticing its many textures, the absolute stillness of the stone, the slight hiss of the lamp flame, the distant whisper of a breeze that touches only the highest branches and does not reach the ground. Your own breathing becomes part of the quiet, slow and regular, and you let it slow further until it matches the rhythm of the night. The first stars appear high in the pale sky, tiny points of light that seem to prick through the darkness one by one. You find the brightest one directly overhead and watch it for a long moment, letting its steady light anchor your gaze. Another appears to its left, then another, until the whole dome of the sky begins to fill with a fine dusting of stars. They are faint at first, as if unsure whether the night has fully arrived, but they grow stronger as the sky darkens to a deep blue-black. The stars do not move in any way you can see, yet you know they are turning slowly above you, the great wheel of the heavens rotating around the fixed point of the northern sky. You do not need to track their movement tonight. It is enough to know it is happening, to feel yourself standing still while the whole universe turns. You shift your gaze back to the spirit path, and notice how the starlight now touches the flagstones, giving them a faint silver-grey color that was not there before. The nearest stone lion has a soft highlight along the curve of its back, and the ears of the stone horses are just barely visible as small points of lighter grey. The darkness has not removed these shapes entirely, but has translated them into a new language of shadow and faint light, a language you have learned to read during your many watches. You understand now that the night is not a single uniform blackness, but a layered thing, with depths and textures and subtle variations. The sealed door behind you is the darkest point, an absolute black rectangle that absorbs all light, while the grassy slope of the mound above it holds a softer darkness, almost velvety, with the starlight catching on the tips of the long grass blades. You adjust the weight of the spear slightly, feeling the smooth wood under your fingers, and then you let your body become still again. A small moth, flutters into the circle of lamplight and orbits the flame once before disappearing into the dark. Its brief presence leaving no trace. Nothing else moves. The night has now fully arrived, and you are its only waking witness in this courtyard of stone and silence. The thought does not trouble you. It settles into your mind like the cool air on your skin, a simple fact of your duty. You are here to watch the darkness gather, to stand between the sleeping emperor and the sleeping world, and to let the hours pass in quiet attention. The flame of the lamp burns steadily, the stars rotate imperceptibly overhead, and you stand motionless at the threshold, waiting for nothing and everything, letting the first watch of the night begin. True night arrives without sound, a presence that fills the valley like water filling a basin, and you feel it settle around you as a change in pressure, a quiet weight that presses gently on your ears and softens the edges of your awareness. The distant hills, which were still faint shapes against the sky when you first took your position, are now completely gone, swallowed by the darkness that has risen to meet the stars. The world has contracted to the immediate circle of the paved court, the grassy mound, and the soft glow of your two lamps, one burning in the brazier, and the smaller one flickering in its wall niche. Everything beyond this small island of light has ceased to exist in any visible form, and you understand that for the rest of the night, this courtyard will be the entire universe. The stone door behind you has changed its character in the deeper darkness, its carved guardian figures no longer reading as three-dimensional forms, but flattening into the surface like drawings on silk. You glance over your shoulder and see how the lamplight now rakes across the stone, casting very faint shadows in the carved grooves. A dragon's tail here, a cloud scroll there, appearing and disappearing as the flame moves in its small, irregular dance. The faces of the guardians are completely lost in shadow, their fierce expressions softened into nothing, and the whole door seems less like a barrier and more like a smooth, dark wall, patient and unreadable. The oil in the brazier gives a soft pop, a tiny sound that seems enormous in the stillness, and then the flame steadies again, and the shadows on the door settle back into their former positions. You hear a nightjar call once, from the deep darkness of the cypress grove, a single liquid note that rises and then cuts off abruptly, as if the bird has reconsidered its song. The sound hangs in the air for a moment and then fades, leaving behind a silence that feels deeper than before, a silence so complete that you become aware of your own heartbeat as a small distant companion, a muffled rhythm that you feel more in your chest than hear with your ears. You breathe in slowly, and the sound of your breath seems loud, a gentle rustle of air that reminds you how quiet the night has become. When you breathe out, the silence rushes back in, and you let it fill you, feeling your thoughts slow down to match the stillness of the stones. Now you begin to notice the layers of shadow that surround you, each one a different texture and depth. The darkest point is the sealed entrance directly behind you, an absolute black rectangle that seems to absorb the lamplight rather than reflect it, a doorway into a darkness so complete that it might go on forever. Just above it, the grassy slope of the mound holds a softer darkness, a velvety grey-black where the starlight catches faintly on the tips of the grass blades, making the whole surface shimmer very slightly as the breeze moves across it. The flagstones under your feet are a different shade again, a silvery darkness where the starlight pools between the stones, picking out the fine lines of the joints and the small worn depressions where countless feet have walked over the centuries. You let your eyes travel slowly across these different qualities of darkness, noting how the shadow under the stone lion is heavier than the shadow under the horse, how the air itself seems to have a faint luminescence near the lamps and a dense opacity near the outer wall. The night is not one thing but many, and you are learning its geography as you stand in your small pool of light. Time passes without any measure that you can hold on to. You have no water clock here, no incense sticks burning down to mark the hours, only the slow tilt of the heavens above the mound. You find a single bright star just above the crest of the grassy hill, and you watch it for a long while, noticing how it seems to have moved a tiny distance since you last looked, though you cannot be sure if the movement is real or imagined. The star is a steady white point, not twinkling like some of the others, and its constancy makes it a good companion for the watch. You let your gaze rest on it and then drift away, returning to it later to find it has shifted again. A small change that tells you the night is progressing in its silent, inevitable way. The great wheel of the sky turns without hurry, and your own stillness becomes a kind of anchor, a fixed point in the middle of all that slow rotation. Your body grows heavy as the hours accumulate, a pleasant heaviness that spreads from your shoulders down through your back and into your legs. You are not tired in the way of needing sleep. Rather, your body has settled into its standing posture so completely that it feels like a natural state, as if you have always been here and always will be. The weight of the spear against your shoulder is a familiar comfort, the coolness of the wooden shaft, a constant reference point for your fingers. You shift your weight very slightly from your left foot to your right, a movement so small that it barely disturbs the stillness, and then you settle again, letting the minutes dissolve into each other. The fabric of your robe brushes softly against your ankles, and the sensation is distant, something happening at the edge of your awareness while your main attention stays spread across the whole courtyard, taking in everything and nothing. The stone lion nearest to you, the one with the chipped ear that you noticed during your walk along the spirit path, now stands just at the edge of the lamplight, its front paws and mane catching a faint golden glow while its hindquarters remain in deep shadow. You let your gaze rest on the surface of its carved face, tracing the warm contours of its muzzle and the smooth hollows where its eyes once had more detail. The darkness around the lion seems to breathe, a slow pulse of deepening and lightening that you know is just the movement of the lamp flame, yet it creates an impression of life in the stone, a quiet animation that holds your attention without demanding anything. The lion does not move, its outline remains fixed, yet the play of light and shadow across its surface makes it seem as if it is slowly waking from a very long dream, then sinking back into sleep, over and over. You become aware of the temperature again, a gradual cooling that has been continuing since sunset and now reaches a stable point, the stones releasing the last of their stored warmth into the night air. The cold comes up through the soles of your shoes, a slow seep that makes your feet feel distant and slightly numb, though not unpleasantly so. You flex your toes inside the cloth shoes, feeling the slight give of the fabric, and then let them relax again. The air on your face is cool and clean, carrying the dry scent of the cypress trees and the faint mineral smell of the stones, and you breathe it in slowly, letting it fill your lungs and then escape in a long, quiet exhale. The lamp oil adds its own sharp note to the air, a tang that lingers at the back of your throat, and beneath everything is the earthy smell of the mound itself, a smell of old soil and deep time that rises from the grass and settles over the courtyard like a blanket. In the stillness, you begin to hear sounds that were hidden by the activity of the day, small noises that belong only to the deep night. There is a faint creaking from the cypress grove, the sound of branches rubbing against each other as the breeze moves through them, a sound so high and thin that it might be the call of a distant insect. The bronze brazier makes a soft ticking noise as it cools and contracts in the night air, a tiny metallic sound that repeats at irregular intervals. From far away, beyond the valley walls, you hear the brief cry of a fox or some other night animal, a single sharp bark that echoes once and then is gone, leaving the silence even more complete. You listen to these sounds without seeking them out, letting them come and go as they will, and each one seems to deepen the peace of the watch rather than disturb it. You turn your attention back to the sealed door, noticing now how the lamplight plays across the carved surfaces in a slow rhythm that matches your own breathing. The dragon's body, which had been invisible in the deeper darkness, now emerges as a faint line of gold, the flame catching the raised edge of the carving and tracing its curve from tail to head. The cloud patterns around the dragon shimmer briefly and then fade, then shimmer again, as if the whole door is breathing with you. You find this rhythm comforting, a gentle pulse of light and dark that gives a structure to the formless hours. You do not try to hold the image or study it closely. You simply let it be there, a quiet presence at your back that you can sense without turning around. The Emperor sleeps behind that door, wrapped in his jade and silk, and the thought is not frightening, but strangely peaceful, as if you are guarding the deepest and most sacred sleep of all. The night continues to deepen, and you notice that the starlight on the flagstones has grown brighter, the silver pools now distinct and clear. The constellation that your father called the Weaving Girl has risen higher in the sky, its 5 stars forming a small kite shape that hangs over the eastern hills. You find it without effort, tracing its outline with your eyes, and then you let your gaze drift to the nearby stars, the fainter ones that fill the spaces between the bright points. There are so many of them, a fine dust of light that seems to thicken the longer you look, until the whole sky is a great river of stars pouring across the darkness. The Milky Way stretches from north to south, a pale band of light that passes directly over the tomb mound, and you imagine the Emperor's spirit traveling along that bright road, visiting the celestial palaces and then returning to rest in his jade chamber. The image holds your mind for a while, soft and dreamlike, and then it fades into the general quiet of your thoughts. Your body continues its slow adjustment to the long-standing, and you find that you've entered a state where the boundary between yourself and the courtyard begins to blur. You are aware of the stone under your feet and the spear against your shoulder, but these sensations feel continuous with the darkness and the starlight and the slow breathing of the lamp flame. You are not separate from the watch. You are part of it, another stone guardian standing at the threshold, another quiet witness to the turning of the night. The thought is not strange or unsettling. It is simply true, and you accept it without resistance. The older guard told you once that the best watchmen become invisible, not by hiding, but by becoming so still and so present that the night accepts them as part of itself, and you understand now what he meant. The darkness around the stone line continues its slow pulse, and you let your gaze rest there, watching the way the shadow seems to gather and release, a rhythm that has been going on since the first lamp was lit. The lion's chipped ear is a small irregularity in the otherwise smooth curve of its head, a detail that the night has not erased but softened into a gentle notch. You think about the craftsman who carved this lion, his hands shaping the stone with chisel and mallet, adding the lines around the mouth and the subtle swell of the mane, unaware that centuries later a guard would stand here in the darkness and trace those same lines with his eyes. The connection across time is faint but real, and it adds another layer to the quiet texture of the watch. The hours stretch on, and you feel the night reaching its deepest point, the time when even the insects fall silent and the whole valley holds its breath. You are completely still now, your breathing so shallow that it barely moves the air, your eyes half closed as you let the darkness fill your senses. The lamp burns on, its flame a steady golden tongue that licks the darkness without consuming it, and the smaller lamp in the wall niche flickers once as a drop of oil finds the wick. The stone door stands behind you, solid and silent, the carved dragon sleeping on its surface. The stars continue their slow turn overhead, and you stand at the center of all this stillness, a guard made of patience and shadow, waiting for the first hint of dawn that is still many hours away. You turn your full attention to the long row of stone figures that lines the spirit path, stretching away from the tomb toward the distant valley gate. Until now they have been a presence at the edge of your awareness, dark shapes that you passed on your walk and then let recede into the general shadow. Now you allow your gaze to move along them slowly, one by one, noticing how the starlight touches each surface in a slightly different way. The moon has not yet risen above the eastern hills, so only the stars provide illumination, a faint silver glow that does not reveal color or detail, but draws the soft outlines of the guardians against the deeper darkness of the cypress trees. The statues stand in pairs on either side of the path, silent and motionless, and they seem to be not so much guarding the tomb as simply holding the night in place, anchoring the darkness to the earth with their weight of stone. The pair closest to you are the stone horses, the ones with their heads lowered and their manes carved in sweeping curves that flow down their necks. In this faint light, the horses look as if they are grazing on the starlight itself, their muzzles nearly touching the flagstones, their ears pricked forward in an attitude of quiet attention. You can make out the swell of their chests and the long, smooth lines of their legs, each hoof set squarely on its stone base. The carver gave them a gentle expression, and even now, with their eyes reduced to shallow hollows that hold small pools of shadow, There is a patience in their posture that speaks to you. They have been standing here for centuries, waiting for the emperor to ride out again, though they know as well as you do that he will never come. Their stillness is not one of abandonment, but a faithful service, a duty accepted so completely that it has become their nature. Beyond the horses, the next pair of guardians are the elephants, massive and round, their bodies taking up more space on the path than any of the other statues. Their backs are broad platforms of darkness, their heads low and heavy, their trunks curling inward toward their chests in a gesture that in daylight seems playful, but now, under the stars, looks like deep contemplation. The starlight falls on the top of their heads and the curve of their backs, leaving their undersides and legs in thick shadow so that they appear to float just above the ground, tethered only by the faint gleam on their stone tusks. The elephants carry a silence that is different from the silence of the horses, a heavier, deeper quiet that seems to absorb sound rather than simply exist alongside it. When you look at them, you feel the urge to breathe more slowly, to let your own body become as solid and as still as theirs. Next come the camels, with their long curved necks and the distinctive humps on their backs, their legs folded beneath them so that they kneel on the stone pedestals. The starlight outlines the angle of their necks and the slight turn of their heads, giving them a watchful appearance, as if they are scanning the horizon for some long-delayed caravan. One of the camels has its mouth slightly open, a detail you know from daylight but can only imagine now. The carved gap, just a deeper shadow among shadows. Their humps create a gentle double curve that catches the light in a way that makes them seem almost soft, like mounds of smooth clay rather than hard stone. You remember walking past these camels on hot afternoons and seeing the way the sun baked their surfaces, the tiny cracks that had formed over the centuries. But tonight, those cracks are hidden, and the camels are simply perfect shapes, patient and enduring. The final figures before the path disappears into the darkness of the outer gate are the civil officials, tall statues of men in flowing robes with their hands clasped before them in a gesture of respectful service. Their stone sleeves hang in elaborate folds, now just a series of vertical shadows that ripple faintly as the starlight moves across them. Their faces are raised slightly, looking toward the tomb, and even without visible features, they convey a solemn dignity, a quiet pride in their eternal posting. One of the officials holds a tablet, a flat rectangle of stone against his chest, and another has a slight tilt to his head that suggests he is listening for something, a sound that will never come. You are stood near these officials during the day and notice the worn places on their robes where centuries of rain have smoothed the stone, but tonight they are whole again, their surfaces untouched by time, perfect guardians in a perfect darkness. You let your gaze travel back along the line of statues, from the officials to the camels, from the camels to the elephants, from the elephants to the horses, and finally to the lion nearest the brazier, whose chipped ear you have come to know so well in the lamplight. The entire procession stands in a silence so complete that you feel you could hear a single grain of stone fall if one ever did. But nothing falls, nothing moves, nothing changes. The guardians are permanent in a way that you are not, and this thought settles into your mind with a gentle weight. You are a temporary presence here, a breath of warmth in the cold night. But these stone animals and stone men have been here for generations before you, and will remain for generations after you have completed your last watch. Rather than making you feel small, this thought gives you comfort. You are part of a long chain of watchers, each one standing in this same spot, each one looking out at these same stone companions, each one letting the hours pass in the same slow rhythm. You remember the older guard who trained you, a man with grey in his beard and a voice like dry leaves, telling you that the secret of the long watch is to become like one of the stone guardians. He said that you should let your thoughts settle into the same stillness that fills the carved bodies of the horses and elephants, letting each worry and each memory sink down like a pebble dropped into deep water, falling until it disappears. He told you that the stone animals are not just decorations but teachers. They know how to wait without impatience, how to be still without stiffness, how to exist in the night without fear. You did not fully understand his words when you were a new guard, but now, after many watches, you are beginning to learn what he meant. Your body has found its standing posture, your breath has slowed to match the pace of the night, and your mind has grown quieter, less inclined to wander, more content to simply observe. The starlight continues to shift very slightly as the hours pass, and you notice how the highlights on the stone guardians change position, moving from the tops of their heads to the sides of their faces, then to their shoulders. The movement is so slow that you cannot see it happening, but when you look away and then look back, you find that the light has moved, a tiny progression that marks the turning of the sky. The elephant that had a bright patch on its left ear now has that light on its forehead. The camel, that was entirely dark, now shows a thin line of silver along the top of its hump. You watch these changes with a quiet fascination, the kind of attention that asks nothing and expects nothing, simply noting the slow transformation of shadow into light and light back into shadow. The stone guardians are a sundial of sorts, their bodies tracking the heavens with a precision that no human clock could match, and you are the only one here to read the time they tell. A small breeze stirs the cypress trees again, and you hear the dry rustle of needles, a sound like very distant rain. The breeze reaches the spirit path and touches the stone horses first, flowing around their carved manes and tails, without moving a single strand of stone. It continues along the row, past the elephants and camels, and you see the air shimmer slightly where it passes, a faint disturbance in the starlight. Then it reaches you, cooling your face and stirring the hem of your robe. And then it is gone, leaving the statues as still as they were before. The guardians have withstood countless such breezes, along with storms and heat and the slow grind of frost, and yet they remain, their shapes essentially unchanged, their duty unbroken. You feel a kinship with them now, a shared purpose that spans the gulf between living flesh and carved stone. You find yourself thinking about the day these statues were placed here, imagining the long procession of workers and oxen dragging the massive stones along the valley floor, the shouts of the foreman and the grind of ropes and pulleys. The horses would have been lifted onto their pedestals first, perhaps, their smooth bodies gleaming in the sunlight, their fresh chisel marks sharp and clean. Then the elephants, too heavy for any single team, requiring the labor of many hands working together. The camels and officials would have followed, each one set in its appointed place with ceremony and care. And then the workers would have left, and the first night would have fallen on the new guardians, and they would have begun their long watch, which has continued without interruption to this very moment. The generations of workers are long gone, their bones return to the earth, but the stone they placed remains, and you are here to witness its continued vigil. Your eyes return to the nearest horse, and you notice a small detail that you had not seen before, even in daylight. Just behind its left ear, there is a thin line of slightly darker stone, a vein of mineral that runs through the carving like a closed eyelid. In the starlight, it catches a tiny glint, a faint sparkle that appears and disappears as you shift your head. You wonder if the original carver saw this vein and chose to work around it, or if he simply accepted it as part of the stone's nature, a flaw that made the horse unique. Either way, it is there now, a secret that only the night reveals, and you file it away in your memory as one more piece of the mosaic that is this watch. The guardians are full of such secrets, you realize, small variations in texture and shape that no casual visitor would ever notice, but that you, in your long hours of stillness, have come to know. The silence of the stone animals is beginning to influence your own mind, and you find that your thoughts are becoming simpler, more image-based, less like a conversation, and more like a slow series of pictures. You picture the sunlight warming the horses' backs, the rain pooling in the hollows of the elephants' ears, the snow capping the officials' heads. These images drift through your awareness without any narrative, just moments of light and weather that the guardians have experienced over the centuries. Then the images fade, and you are left with the pure sensation of the present, the cool air on your skin, the solid ground under your feet, the steady flame of the lamp. The stone guardians have taught you this, the art of being fully in one place and one time, and you are grateful for the lesson. The night stretches on, and the stars continue their slow rotation. You watch the Weaving Girl constellation climb higher, its 5 stars now clear of the hills and hanging in the open sky. The stone officials seem to be looking up at it, their stone faces tilted toward the heavens, and you imagine them exchanging silent observations about the movement of the stars, a conversation made entirely of stillness. The camels kneel in their eternal patience, the elephants stand in their heavy wisdom, the horses wait with their heads bowed, and you, the living guard, complete the circle of watchers. Together you hold the night steady, a community of stillness spanning the centuries, and in this moment there is nowhere else you would rather be. The watch continues, and the stone guardians remain, and you remain with them. The stillness of the deep night has settled so completely over the courtyard that you have almost forgotten the existence of movement, of change, of anything that is not this perfect suspension of time. Your body has become a fixed point in a world of stone and shadow, your breathing so shallow and regular that it barely disturbs the air near your lips. The lamp flames burn without flickering, as if they too have entered the same state of patient waiting. Even the stars overhead seem to have paused in their slow rotation, though you know this is only an illusion created by your own stillness. And then, into this profound quiet, a new presence arrives. Not a sound at first, but a faint stirring high above the tomb mound, a subtle shift in the texture of the darkness where the tops of the cypress trees meet the night sky. You lift your gaze slowly, your neck moving with the careful deliberation of one who has been motionless for a very long time. The cypress grove rises behind the grassy mound, a wall of darkness that has until now been as still as everything else. But now the highest branches, the ones that reach just above the crest of the mound, are beginning to show a small movement, a gentle sway that travels from the very tips downward, branch to branch, in a slow cascade of dry rustling. The sound is so faint that at first you are not certain you are hearing it at all. It might be only the memory of a sound, an echo from another night. But then the rustling grows more distinct, a soft shushing that reminds you of a mother quieting a child, and you know that a breeze has found its way into the valley. You watch the movement travel downward through the grove, from the highest needles to the middle boughs, then to the lower branches that droop over the back side of the mound. The cypress trees do not rustle like broad-leafed trees. Their sound is drier, more delicate, a papery whisper of needles brushing against needles. It is the sound of age and patience, the same sound these trees have made for centuries when the night wind comes. The breeze reaches the lowest branches now, and you can see the dark forms of the foliage swaying very slightly, a motion that is more like breathing than like the thrashing of a storm wind. This is a gentle visitor, a quiet breath of the earth itself, coming to check on the sleeping valley before moving on. The first touch of the breeze on your face is so light that you might have imagined it, a mere coolness that settles on your forehead and the bridge of your nose, then spreads to your cheeks. It carries with it a taste that you have come to know well, the clean, faintly metallic taste of air that has traveled a long distance over open water, picking up moisture and the subtle minerals of distant streams. Behind that taste is another layer, the dry herbal scent of the mountain shrubs that grow on the high slopes beyond the valley. Tiny plants with grey-green leaves that release their fragrance only when the wind disturbs them. You breathe in slowly, letting the air fill your lungs, and you feel the coolness travel down your throat and into your chest, a small refreshment that your body welcomes after the long hours of stillness. The scent of lamp oil is temporarily pushed aside, replaced by these wilder, cleaner smells, and the change is like opening a door onto a different landscape, one that exists only in the darkness. The breeze moves past your face and continues across the courtyard, and you turn your head slightly to follow its path, watching it reach the stone guardians that line the spirit way. The horses do not move, of course, but the air swirls around their carved legs and lifts the faintest particles of dust from the pedestals, a small disturbance that settles again almost immediately. The elephants receive the breeze on their broad backs, and for a moment you imagine you can see the air parting around their massive forms, flowing over their stone hides like water over river rocks. The camels, with their long necks raised, seem to be sniffing the air, their carved nostrils testing the new scents with an attention that mirrors your own. The officials remain entirely still, their stone robes too heavy for any wind to stir, but you sense that even they are aware of the change, their patient faces turned toward the source of the coolness. Now you notice that the breeze is not a single steady current, but a series of gentle pulses, each one a little stronger or a little weaker than the last. The first pulse was the lightest, just enough to announce its arrival. The second carries more of the herbal scent from the mountains. The third brings a deeper coolness that makes the skin on your arms tighten slightly beneath your robe. Between the pulses, the air goes still again, but it is a different kind of stillness now, a stillness that holds the memory of movement, like the surface of a pond after a pebble has been dropped and the ripples have faded. You listen to the cypress trees as they respond to each pulse, their rustling rising and falling in a slow rhythm that matches the breathing of the valley itself. When the breeze strengthens, the rustling becomes a soft roar, a sound like distant surf. When the breeze weakens, the rustling subsides to a whisper, then to nothing, and the trees wait in silence for the next breath. You let your gaze travel to the grassy slope of the tomb mound, where the breeze is now making itself visible in a different way. The long blades of grass, which have been dark and motionless all night, are beginning to ripple in a wave that starts at the base of the mound and climbs steadily upward. The wave is a change in texture more than a change in color, a shimmer of faint starlight that travels across the surface as each blade bends and then straightens again. You watch the ripple reach the middle of the slope, then continue upward, a single coherent motion that seems to have a purpose of its own. When the wave reaches the crest of the mound, it hesitates for a moment, as if the grass there is reluctant to let it go, and then it spills over the top and disappears down the far side, heading toward the cypress grove from which the breeze first came. The mound returns to stillness, the grass blades settling back into their former positions, and you feel a quiet satisfaction at having witnessed this small event, this brief marriage of wind and earth. The breeze, having completed its journey across the mound, now circles back toward you, and you feel it on the back of your neck this time, a cool touch that makes you aware of the warmth your own body has been generating. You have been standing so still that you had forgotten your own heat, but now the contrast between the cool air and the warmth of your skin reminds you that you are a living presence in this landscape of stone and shadow. The breeze plays with the loose fold of your robe near your collar, lifting the fabric slightly and then letting it fall, a gentle teasing that is almost playful. You do not move to adjust the robe. You let the breeze have its way, and after a moment it moves on, satisfied. The sounds from the cypress grove are changing now as the breeze shifts direction, and you hear individual trees beginning to speak in slightly different voices. The tree at the far left of the grove, an old giant with a split crown, produces a lower rustle, a deeper and more resonant sound that seems to come from the trunk as much as from the needles. The younger trees in the center of the grove, with their tighter foliage, make a lighter, crisper sound, a rapid whisper like the turning of many pages. The tree nearest to you, a cypress that leans slightly toward the tomb, has a sound all its own, a soft sigh that rises and falls with a melancholy grace. Together these different voices create a quiet music, a night chorus that has no melody but only texture, a tapestry of dry sound woven from the breathing of the trees. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sound fill your awareness completely, and you find that you can separate the layers of the rustling, just as you earlier separated the layers of the darkness. The highest layer is the faintest, the sound of the topmost needles brushing against the sky. Below that is the middle layer, the sound of branches crossing and recrossing each other, and at the bottom is the deepest layer, the sound of the breeze flowing around the thick trunks and through the undergrowth of dry ferns that carpets the grove floor. Each layer has its own rhythm and its own volume, and together they create a three-dimensional landscape of sound that surrounds the tomb on three sides. You open your eyes again and the visual world returns, but the auditory landscape remains just as vivid, a reminder that the night speaks in many languages. The breeze begins to weaken now, its pulses growing shorter and further apart, and the rustling of the cypresses gradually subsides. The tree with the split crown is the first to fall silent, its deep voice fading into the general darkness. Then the younger trees in the center quiet down, their crisp whispers becoming intermittent. and finally the leaning cypress gives one last soft sigh, and then is still. The grove returns to its former state of perfect motionlessness, each branch and needle frozen in place, and the silence that follows is deeper than any silence you have experienced so far this night. It is a silence that carries the memory of the sound that has just passed, a silence that seems to ring with the absence of rustling, and you notice how the absence of sound has a presence of its own, a weight that presses on your ears and makes you aware of the vast empty space that surrounds the courtyard. The silence is not an emptiness, but a fullness, a container that holds the entire valley in its invisible embrace. You notice now that the breeze, though it has left the cypresses, is still present in other ways. The air near the ground has grown noticeably cooler, and the scent of the mountain shrubs remains, now mixed with the returning smell of lamp oil and the dry earth of the mound. Your cheeks feel cool and slightly tight, as if the breeze has left a thin film of moisture on your skin, and when you lick your lips, you taste the faint mineral quality of distant water again. The flagstones at your feet have also cooled, and the sensation comes up through your shoes more strongly than before, a steady reminder that the earth is slowly releasing its stored warmth into the night. You shift your weight slightly from your left foot to your right, the first deliberate movement you have made in what feels like many hours, and the soft scuff of your cloth shoe on the stone is a tremendous event, a sound that seems to echo across the courtyard and then fade into the great silence. The sound is so distinct, so full of texture, that you find yourself replaying it in your mind, noting the initial scrape of the fabric, the slight grit of the stone, the way the sound died away into the surrounding stillness. After such a long period of motionlessness, even this tiny sound feels meaningful, a proof that you are still awake and still present. You settle back into your standing posture, your weight evenly distributed again, and let the silence wash over you. The lamp flames have not moved during the breeze. Their small golden tongues continue to burn steadily, undisturbed by the gentle air currents that stirred the trees and the grass. You find this curious, that the flames could remain so still while the rest of the valley was in motion, and you wonder if the lamps have their own kind of stillness, a stillness that is immune to the small weathers of the night. Or perhaps the breeze simply did not reach them, blocked by the bulk of the tomb mound, and the flames have continued their patient burning without any knowledge of the cool visitor that passed through the courtyard. Either way, the lamps remain your constant companions. Their light a warm anchor in the darkness, their steady glow a counterpoint to the now vanished rustling of the trees. You turn your attention back to the grassy mound, now entirely still again, and you see that the starlight has returned to its former distribution, the tips of the grass blades holding tiny silver points of light that do not move. The wave that you watched climb the slope has left no visible trace, and the mound looks exactly as it did before the breeze arrived, a smooth dark hill that rises against the starry sky. And yet you know that something has changed. The grass has bent and straightened, the trees have spoken and fallen silent, the air has delivered its cargo of scents and tastes, and you have witnessed it all. The night is not a static thing, you realize. It is a slow river of small events, each one flowing into the next, and your watch is not just about guarding a sealed door, but about paying attention to the quiet life of the valley as it breathes through the darkness. The memory of the breeze lingers in your mind as the hours pass, and you find yourself listening for its return, half expecting another pulse of cool air to stir the cypresses again. But the night remains still, and the trees remain silent, and the only sound is the faint hiss of the lampwick and the distant, almost imagined rush of the river beyond the hills. The watch continues, and you continue with it, standing in the cool aftermath of the breeze, letting the silence grow around you like water filling a well, patient and unending. The night has now reached its deepest point, that hour when the whole world seems to pause and take a single long breath before beginning the slow turn toward dawn. You sense this moment not by any clock, but by the quality of the silence, which has changed its texture in the past hour, growing denser and more complete. The faint chittering of insects that had been a background presence earlier in the night, a thin veil of sound at the very edge of hearing, has now stopped entirely. Even the distant rush of the river, which you could half imagine when the breeze was active, has faded into an absence so total that you might be standing at the bottom of a deep well, insulated from every living vibration. The valley holds its breath, and you find yourself holding yours in sympathy, then letting it out slowly, a quiet offering to the stillness. The moon has risen at last, appearing above the eastern hills while your attention was elsewhere, and now it hangs just above the tomb mound, a thin crescent so delicate that it seems to be made of frost rather than light. Its color is a pale silver white, the color of new ice on a winter puddle, and it casts a light so faint that it does not compete with the stars, but rather adds a new layer to them, a subtle wash that changes the darkness from black to a deep velvet gray. The crescent is not full enough to illuminate the valley. Instead, it outlines things, drawing a fine edge along the top of the tomb mound, tracing the ridgeline where the grass meets the sky, and picking out the very tips of the cypress trees with tiny points of silver. The sealed door behind you, which has been an absolute black rectangle all night, now shows a thin thread of light along its upper edge, the moonlight catching the carved lintel stone and turning the coiled dragons into a faint filigree of silver lines. You turn your head slightly to observe this, noting how the light seems to hover just above the stone rather than resting on it, a delicate presence that could be blown away by the slightest breath. The cold that you felt earlier creeping upward through your shoes has now become a steady presence, no longer a distant sensation, but a slow seep that has reached your ankles and is beginning to climb through your calves. It is not a painful cold, not the sharp bite of winter that makes you stamp your feet and clap your hands. It is a gradual cooling, a gentle extraction of warmth that feels almost like the stones are breathing, drawing your body heat into themselves with a slow, patient rhythm. You flex your toes again inside your cloth shoes and feel the slight resistance of the cold fabric, the way the soles of your feet have become distant and cool, as if they belong to someone else standing a little way off. The sensation spreads upward, reaching your knees now, and you imagine the cold as a slow tide rising through the stone floor, flooding the courtyard with an invisible water that carries the temperature of deep earth. Your thighs begin to feel the chill, and then your hips, and you know that soon your whole body will be filled with this cool stillness, will become part of the stone's own temperature. But the cold does not make you shiver. Instead, it seems to slow your blood even further, to calm the small movements of your body until you are as still on the inside as you are on the outside. The older guard told you about this, you remember, on one of your first nights of training. He said that the cold of the deep hour is not an enemy, but a teacher, showing you how to let go of your body's small demands, how to become as patient as the flagstones themselves. His voice comes back to you now, not as a distinct memory, but as a general warmth, a remembered tone of reassurance. You had been young then, barely old enough to wear the ceremonial robe, and you had struggled with the long watches, your legs aching, your mind restless, your eyes constantly searching for some sign that the night was ending. The older guard had stood beside you on that first watch, his own body so still that he might have been one of the stone officials, and he had spoken to you in a voice that was low and slow, a voice that seemed to come from the ground rather than from a man. He told you that the secret of standing through the deep hour was not to fight the stillness, but to join it, to let your thoughts become as quiet as the stone animals, to let each worry and each memory sink down like a pebble dropped into deep water, falling until it disappeared. He said that the night was not empty, but full of a peace that most people never experience because they're always asleep or always rushing towards sleep. But you, as a guard, had the gift of being awake in the deepest quiet, and if you learned to accept that gift, the hours would pass like clouds crossing a distant sky, visible but weightless. You had not understood him at first. The words had seemed like riddles, pretty sounds without meaning. But now, standing in the cold of the deep hour with the crescent moon above the mound and the whole valley silent around you, you begin to understand. Your thoughts have slowed, your body has settled, and the watch no longer feels like waiting, but like a state of being, a simple presence that asks nothing and fears nothing. Your mind drifts now, not with urgency, but with a gentle aimlessness, moving like a leaf on a slow current. You find yourself thinking about the chamber that lies inside the mound, the sealed space that you guard but have never seen. You have heard the stories, of course, passed down from the older guards and from the officials who maintain the tomb records. The emperor lies at the center of the mound, they say, in a chamber lined with cypress wood and lacquered screens, his body wrapped in a suit made of jade pieces sewn together with gold thread. The jade suit covers him from head to foot, each plaque polished to a soft green glow, the gold thread glinting in the darkness that has filled the chamber for centuries. Around him are arranged his offerings, bronze vessels filled with the remains of ancient foods, clay figures of servants and musicians who will attend him in the afterlife, silk robes folded in cedar chests, and weapons laid out in precise rows, their bronze blades still sharp after all this time. The ceiling of the chamber, they say, is painted with the constellations as they appeared on the night the emperor died, a map of the heavens that has been sealed in darkness ever since the great door was closed. And in the center of it all, the emperor sleeps, his hands folded on his chest, his jade suit shimmering very faintly with the last light that ever touched it, the light of the lamps that the priests carried when they laid him to rest. The image is not frightening to you. It is strangely peaceful, a picture of perfect rest. You imagine the silence inside that chamber, a silence that has not been disturbed by voice or footstep, or even the movement of air for all the years since the sealing. That silence must be different from the silence outside, you think, deeper and older, a silence that has had time to settle into every crack and corner, to become as solid as the jade itself. The silence inside the tomb feels, in your imagination, like a presence rather than an absence, a watchful quiet that holds the emperor safe in his eternal sleep. And you, standing at the threshold, are the guardian of that silence, the one who ensures that no sound from the living world will ever reach the emperor's chamber. The thought fills you with a quiet honor, not a prideful feeling, but a simple sense of rightness, as if you have been placed here by a design much larger than yourself and have accepted your role with your whole heart. The cold continues its slow climb through your body, reaching your chest now, and you feel your breathing become shallower, as if your lungs are conserving warmth. Your heart beats slowly, a steady muffled rhythm that you can feel in your temples and in the tips of your fingers where they rest on the spear shaft. The moonlight has shifted slightly, the crescent having moved a little higher above the mound, and the thread of silver on the door lintel has grown a fraction wider, now illuminating the faces of the guardian carvings for the first time tonight. Their features are still faint, just suggestions of eyes and mouths and the flowing lines of their hair, but they are no longer entirely hidden. They seem to be watching you with a calm benevolence, fellow guardians who share your duty and understand your thoughts. You meet their stone gaze and feel a kinship with them, a sense of shared purpose that crosses the boundary between the living and the carved. You remember another thing the older guard told you, about the nature of guarding. He said that the tomb does not need protection from thieves or invaders, for the door is too heavy and the mound too vast for any human force to breach. What the tomb needs, he said, is a witness, someone to stand at the threshold and acknowledge the emperor's continued existence in the afterlife. Every night that you stand here, he said, you are performing an act of remembrance, keeping the connection between the living world and the world of the ancestors open and clear. Your presence is a thread that ties the present to the past, and as long as guards stand at this door, the emperor will never be truly alone in his jade chamber. The words had seemed like a great weight at the time, a responsibility too large for a young guard to carry. But now, in the deep hour, they feel light, as natural as breathing. You are not carrying a burden, you are simply being present, and that presence is enough. The silence inside the tomb, which you have been imagining, now seems to press outward through the sealed door, merging with the silence of the courtyard until the two become indistinguishable. The whole valley is a single container of quiet, and you are suspended at its center, a small warm point in the vast cool darkness. The feeling is not one of loneliness, but of connection, as if the stones and the trees and the distant hills are all part of the same slow breathing that moves through you. You let your eyes rest on the crescent moon, now clear of the mound and climbing into the open sky, and you feel a quiet gratitude for being allowed to witness this moment, this deepest hour of the night that most people sleep through without ever knowing its peace. The cold is no longer a separate sensation, but simply the temperature of your own stillness, and the silence is no longer an absence of sound, but the substance of the world itself. You stand at the threshold, guarding the deepest sleep of all, and you are content. Far across the valley, beyond the dark ribbon of the river and the low sleeping hills, a single point of light appears and holds steady against the immense darkness. You notice it first as a tiny warmth at the very edge of your vision, a speck of gold so distant that it might be a star that has fallen and become caught in the branches of some unseen tree. But the light does not twinkle like a star, it burns with a constant small determination, and you understand that it is a lamp, a flame, kindled by human hands in the village where the farmers and potters and weavers live their daylight lives. The village is far away, separated from the tomb by the black curve of the river and the folded slopes of two low ridges, yet the light reaches you across all that distance, a quiet messenger from the world of the living. You let your gaze rest on the distant point, feeling a subtle shift in your awareness. Until now, the night has been entirely yours, a private landscape of stone and shadow, shared only with the silent guardians and the slow-turning stars. The appearance of this tiny flame reminds you that the valley is not empty, that beyond the walls of the tomb complex there are other people sleeping, other lamps burning, other watchers perhaps, each keeping their own small vigil against the darkness. The light is a proof of continuity, a thread that ties your solitary watch to the larger fabric of human life, and you feel a quiet kinship with whoever lit that lamp and placed it in a window or on a bedside table. They do not know you are here, and you do not know them, yet for this moment you share the same night, the same cold air, the same slow progress of the moon across the sky. You imagine the village as you've seen it during the day, a cluster of low houses with tile roofs and packed earth courtyards, smoke rising from cooking fires, children chasing chickens through the narrow lanes, old women sitting on doorsteps with their spinning wheels humming. The fields around the village are small and neat, terraced into the hillsides, growing millet and beans and cabbages that the farmers tend with patient hands. There is a well at the center of the village, its stone rim worn smooth by generations of rope, and a small temple dedicated to the local earth god, its red paint fading but still bright against the green of the hills. You have walked through the village on your way to the tomb, accepting a cup of water from a farmer's wife, nodding to the men repairing a terrace wall, stepping aside for a cart loaded with clay pots bound for the market town. The memory is warm and ordinary, filled with the sounds of voices and animals and the smell of wood smoke, and it contrasts so sharply with the silent courtyard where you now stand that the two worlds seem to exist in different ages, separated not by distance, but by a thin veil of time. The lamp in the village continues to burn steadily, and you find yourself wondering about the person who lit it. Perhaps it is a mother who has risen to feed a restless infant, lighting the wick with the embers from the hearth, and then sitting in the warm circle of light, her baby cradled against her shoulder, her eyes heavy with the fatigue of many broken nights. Or perhaps it is an old potter who cannot sleep, whose bones ache with the cold, who has lit his lamp to check on the pots drying on the shelves, running his thumb along the rims to feel for cracks before returning to his bed. Maybe it is a young student bent over a scroll, trying to memorize the classic texts by the guttering flame, his lips moving silently as he recites the ancient words, his eyelids drooping, but his will keeping him awake a little longer. The possibilities drift through your mind without any need for certainty. It is enough to know that someone is there, that the flame is a sign of wakeful life in the vast sleeping valley, and that you are not the only one watching the night pass. The moon has continued its slow climb, and the crescent now hangs higher and brighter, its light touching the landscape with a little more confidence. You can see, faintly, the silver line of the river as it curves through the valley bottom, a pale ribbon that reflects the moonlight in a series of small glints where the water runs over shallow stones. The river is low at this time of year, its voice a distant murmur that you can just detect if you hold your breath and listen very carefully, a sound that is less a noise and more a texture laid over the silence, a continuous softness like the brushing of silk against stone. The hills beyond the river are dark shapes without detail, their slopes covered with the scrubby vegetation that clings to the thin soil, and the village itself is invisible except for the single point of light that marks its location. You try to picture the sleeping houses around that lamp, the darkened windows and the closed doors, the families breathing softly under their thick quilts, the dogs curled in the doorways with their noses tucked under their tails. The image is so peaceful that it adds to your own peace, layering a human warmth over the cool stillness of the tomb courtyard. After a long while, during which the moon has moved a visible distance across the sky and the stars have shifted in their slow rotation, a new sound reaches you from the direction of the village. It is a dog barking, the sound traveling across the miles with a strange clarity, as if the cold air has sharpened it and carried it directly to your ears. The bark is not an alarm or a warning. It is a simple announcement, the kind of bark a dog gives when it has woken from a dream and feels the need to remind the night of its presence. You hear 3 distinct yelps, each one a little softer than the last, and then a pause and then one more bark, very faint, as if the dog has already lowered its head back onto its paws and is half asleep again. The sound fades into the hills, echoing very slightly from the nearest ridge, and then the silence returns, deeper than before. You realize that you are smiling slightly, a small movement of the muscles around your mouth that you had not intended, and you understand that the dog's bark has touched some part of you that misses the ordinary sounds of living, the small noises of animals and people that fill the daylight hours. The courtyard has its own sounds, the hiss of the lamp and the rustle of the cypresses, but they are not the sounds of life. They are the sounds of the elements, of fire and air and stone, and the dog's bark has reminded you of the warmer, messier world that waits beyond the tomb walls. You turn your gaze back to the distant lamp, and you notice that it has flickered, the flame dancing for a moment as if a door has been opened somewhere near it, and a draught has disturbed the air. The flicker is brief, and then the flame steadies again, burning as calmly as before. But the flicker has given you a new piece of information. Someone has moved in that room, passing near the lamp and causing the flame to waver, and you picture the potter returning to his bed, or the mother shifting the baby to her other shoulder, or the student reaching for a dropped brush. The smallness of these imagined actions fills you with a quiet tenderness, a feeling that is not quite sadness and not quite joy, but something in between, a recognition of the fragile, fleeting beauty of ordinary life. You are standing guard at the tomb of an emperor, surrounded by the monuments of eternity, and yet it is this tiny, distant flame that moves you, this evidence of a single life being lived in the darkness. The lamp in the village continues to burn for a time, and you use its steadiness as a marker for the passing of the hours. You look away, letting your gaze travel across the courtyard, checking the stone guardians and the sealed door and the grassy mound, and when you look back, the lamp is still there. You look away again, this time studying the stars, tracing the outline of the weaving girl constellation, noting how its position has shifted relative to the top of the cypress grove. And when you return your attention to the valley, the lamp remains, a constant golden point in the darkness. The reliability of this small flame becomes a comfort, a fixed reference in a night of slow but continuous change, and you feel a sense of companionship with it, as if you and the lamp are 2 watchers keeping each other company across the miles. You do not know how long this quiet exchange continues, you looking at the lamp and the lamp burning in response, but it feels like a long and peaceful conversation made entirely of stillness and light. Then, at a moment that you do not precisely catch because you were studying the stone horses again, the lamp goes out. You look back at the village and find only darkness where the light had been, a small absence that seems larger than the light itself. The hills are black again, the river is a faint silver thread, and the village has returned to its deep nocturnal sleep. You feel a small pang of something that might be loss, but it passes quickly, replaced by a quiet acceptance. The lamp was always going to go out, just as your watch will eventually end and the sun will eventually rise. and its extinguishing is not an ending, but a change, a shift from one state to another. The person who lit the lamp has now fallen asleep, their task completed, their wakefulness surrendered to the pull of the night. You imagine the potter's breathing slowing as he drifts off, the mother closing her eyes as the baby finally settles, the student's head dropping onto his folded arms as sleep overtakes his studies. They have joined the rest of the village in rest, and you remain awake, the sole witness to their transition from light to darkness. The valley now returns to its unbroken darkness, but it is a darkness that has been changed by the memory of the lamp. You can still see the after-image of the flame if you close your eyes, a tiny golden ghost that floats against the black of your eyelids, and the silence carries the echo of the dog's barking, a phantom sound that your ears still half expect to hear again. The connection that you felt to the distant village does not disappear with the light. It lingers in your awareness, a thin thread of warmth that stretches across the cold miles and ties you to the sleeping farmers and potters and weavers. You are separate from them, standing alone in your ceremonial robe with your spear resting on your shoulder. But you are also part of the same night, the same valley, the same slow rhythm of waking and sleeping that governs all living things. The thought is deeply calming, a reminder that your watch is not an isolation, but a different kind of participation, a contribution to the quiet order of the world. You let your breathing settle again, feeling the cold air move in and out of your lungs with a steady, peaceful rhythm. The stars overhead have shifted further, the constellations now tilted at a new angle, and you can see the first faint hint of the Eastern Ocean star rising above the hills, a bright point that the older god told you marks the direction of the distant sea. You have never seen the sea, but you have heard stories of its endless waters and its salty wind, and you try to imagine what it would be like to stand on a shore and watch the waves roll in under the same stars that now watch over the tomb. The image is hazy and incomplete, a dream within a dream, and it fades as your attention returns to the immediate world of the courtyard. The lamp in the brazier burns on, its flame the only light now that the village lamp is gone, and you adjust your grip on the spear, feeling the smooth wood under your fingers, the familiar weight that has become an extension of your own body. The deep hour is passing, you sense, and the night is beginning its long, slow tilt toward dawn. The cold has reached its peak, and will now hold steady for a time, before the first subtle warming that comes just before sunrise. The silence remains complete, but it is a different silence from the one that filled the valley earlier, a silence that seems to be listening, waiting for the first bird call or the first breath of morning wind. You stand in this listening silence, the guardian of the tomb and the keeper of the emperor's sleep, and you feel a quiet gratitude for the small gift of the distant lamp, the brief companionship of a stranger's flame, the reminder that even in the deepest darkness there is always some light burning somewhere, some other watcher sharing the vigil. The watch continues, and you remain patient and still as the night slowly turns on its great invisible axis and the village sleeps on in its blanket of darkness. The moon has set while your attention was fixed on the distant village and its small vanishing flame, slipping below the western ridge without ceremony or sound, and now the sky belongs entirely to the stars. You notice the change first as a deepening of the darkness around you, a return to the pure black that filled the courtyard before the crescent rose. But there is a difference now. Without the moon's thin wash of silver, the stars themselves seem to have grown larger and more numerous, as if they have been waiting for this moment to show their full brilliance. The Milky Way pours across the center of the sky like a river of pale dust, a broad band of light that stretches from the northern horizon all the way to the dark peaks in the south, and its presence is so commanding that you find yourself tilting your head back slowly, letting your gaze travel upward until the tomb mound and the cypress trees and the stone guardians all fall away from your awareness, and there is nothing but the vast glittering dome above you. The cold air wraps around your upturned face, and you feel the small muscles in your neck stretch gently as you hold the position, your breath rising in faint plumes that dissolve almost instantly into the darkness. You have not looked at the sky so fully since the early part of the night when the first stars were appearing, and the change is remarkable. The stars that were then faint and tentative are now bold and steady, each one a sharp point of light that seems to vibrate with a quiet energy. The darker spaces between the stars are not empty, but filled with a fine grain, a suggestion of countless fainter lights that hover just beyond the reach of your vision. You remember something the older gods said about the sky on moonless nights, that it becomes a map of the entire universe, a picture of everything that has ever existed. And standing here with your head tilted back and your eyes lost in the immensity, you understand what he meant. You begin to trace the familiar constellations that your father taught you when you were a child, sitting together on the flat roof of your family home on warm summer nights when sleep was slow to come. He would point upward with a calloused finger, a farmer's hand thick from labor but gentle in its gestures, and he would name the star patterns one by one, telling you the old stories that his own father had told him. The weaving girl sits high in the sky now, her 5 stars forming a small kite shape that hangs over the eastern hills, and across the bright band of the Milky Way, separated from her by the whole width of the celestial river, is the cowherd, his 3 stars in a straight line, with 2 fainter companions on either side. The story says that the weaving girl and the cowherd were lovers who were separated by the Queen Mother of Heaven and placed on opposite sides of the Milky Way, allowed to meet only once a year when a bridge of magpies forms across the river of stars. As a child, you had felt sorry for them, imagining their loneliness as they waited through the long months for their single night of reunion. But now, standing under the same stars in the deep quiet of your watch, the story feels different to you. The weaving girl and the cowherd are not lonely, you think. They are patient, and their patience is a form of devotion, a quiet waiting that is not so different from your own vigil at the tomb. They shine steadily, year after year, century after century, and their light is a kind of faithfulness, a promise kept without words. You shift your gaze to the northern sky, where the northern dipper hangs low, its 7 bright stars forming the shape of a ladle with a long curved handle and a deep bowl. The 2 stars at the front of the bowl point toward the North Star, the fixed point around which the whole sky turns, and you find the North Star easily, a steady light that does not move while all the other stars circle slowly around it. Your father called the Northern Dipper the chariot of the Emperor of Heaven, and he told you that the handle of the ladle pointed to the 4 seasons, swinging around the sky through the year to mark the times of planting and harvest. On this night, in the deepest part of the autumn, the handle points toward the east, toward the place where the sun will rise when the long watch finally ends. You let your eyes follow the line of the handle, tracing it down to the horizon, and you feel a small anticipation for the dawn that is still hours away, a warmth that is not yet in the air but exists as a promise, a direction, a tilt of the earth toward the returning sun. The stars shift so slowly that you cannot see their movement, yet you feel it happening, the whole great wheel turning above you, while you stand fixed to the earth below. The sensation is a strange one, a combination of stillness and motion that seems to contradict itself but is entirely real. You are motionless, your feet planted on the cool flagstones, your spear resting against your shoulder, your body as still as the stone guardians that line the spirit path. And yet you were also moving, carried by the turning of the earth through the vast ocean of the night, the stars flowing past you like distant islands as you sail the dark waters of the sky. The older guard once told you that the earth is a great sphere spinning in the void, and that the stars are fixed while the ground moves beneath you, but you have never been able to feel this in the way he described. What you feel instead is the opposite. The sky is what moves, a slow and majestic rotation that carries the constellations across the dome in a grand procession, while you and the tomb and the valley remain perfectly still, the unmoving center of all that motion. Whether the sky moves or the earth moves does not matter to your experience of the night. What matters is the relationship between the stillness below and the motion above, the way the two balance each other in a harmony that has existed since the beginning of time. A single meteor scratches a brief line across the darkness, appearing without warning in the corner of your vision and disappearing before you can fully turn your head to see it. The streak is a thin white scratch, like a needle drawn quickly across dark silk, and it leaves a faint afterimage that lingers on your vision for a heartbeat and then fades. You've seen many meteors during your watches, and each one brings a small lift of the spirit, a brief excitement that something has happened in the otherwise unchanging sky. But the older guard taught you not to grasp at these moments, not to wish for more of them. He said that the meteors are beautiful precisely because they are rare and brief, and that wanting them to last longer would be a kind of greed, a refusal to accept the nature of things. So you let the image of the meteor fade without clinging to it, returning your eyes to the steady, unchanging light of the other stars, the ones that have been shining for thousands of years, and will shine for thousands of years, and will shine for thousands more. Their constancy is a deeper beauty, a beauty that does not need to surprise or startle, but simply endures, and you find that you prefer it to the brief flash of the meteor, comforting in its reliability. The Milky Way continues to draw your gaze, its pale band now seeming to thicken as your eyes adjust to the darkness. You can see variations in its texture, places where the light is denser, and places where it thins to a faint haze, and you imagine that these variations are clouds of stars, great gatherings of suns so distant that their individual lights merge into a single glow. Your father did not have words for these things. He called the Milky Way the Silver River, and he said that it was the reflection of the earthly river in the sky, a celestial mirror of the waters that flow through the valleys and fields of the living world. But the older guard, who had studied with the scholars in the capital before he came to the tomb, told you a different story. He said that the Milky Way is made of countless stars, each one a sun like our own, and that the universe extends far beyond anything the eye can see, into a darkness that has no end. You remember the night he told you this, standing beside you near the brazier, his voice low and thoughtful, and you remember the feeling that came over you, a vertigo of the imagination, a dizzying sense of your own smallness. Tonight the feeling returns, but it is no longer dizzying. It is peaceful, a quiet acceptance of your place in the vast order of things. You are a small figure, standing at the door of a tomb on a planet spinning through an endless night, and this fact is not frightening, but oddly comforting, a release from the burden of being important. You lower your gaze from the sky, feeling the small muscles in your neck relax as your head returns to its normal position, and you let your eyes rest on the familiar shapes of the courtyard. The stone guardians have been watching the sky with you, their carved faces tilted upward at the same angle as yours, and for a moment you feel that you have shared something with them, a moment of mutual contemplation. The horses stand with their heads slightly raised, their stone eyes fixed on the same constellations you have been tracing. The elephants gaze upward with their heavy, patient expressions. The camels crane their long necks toward the heavens. Even the officials, with their clasped hands and solemn faces, seem to be studying the stars with a quiet reverence. You are surrounded by watchers, stone and human, all of you fixed on the same slow-turning sky, and the sense of community is deep and wordless, a bond that does not need speech or even movement to be real. The cold air has grown still colder during your contemplation of the stars, and you feel it now on the tips of your ears and the bridge of your nose, small points of chill that remind you of your body, even as your mind has been wandering among the constellations. You bring your free hand up to your face and rub your nose gently, feeling the skin cool and slightly stiff under your fingers, and then you let your hand fall back to your side. The spear shaft remains steady under your other hand, its wood now fully adjusted to the temperature of the night, neither warm nor cold, but simply present, a continuation of your arm. You shift your weight slightly, a small adjustment that redistributes the pressure on the soles of your feet, and then you settle again, returning to the perfect stillness that has become your natural state during this long watch. The cypress trees behind the mound are visible now as dark shapes against the star-filled sky, their pointed tops reaching up toward the Milky Way like black flames frozen in mid-flicker. The starlight outlines their silhouettes with a faint grey edge, a soft halo that separates the solid darkness of the trees from the luminous darkness of the sky. You listen for the rustling of their branches but hear only silence. The breeze has not returned, and the trees stand in the same deep stillness that fills the rest of the valley. You imagine the small birds that roost in their upper branches, their feathers fluffed against the cold, their tiny hearts beating slowly as they sleep through the remaining hours of the night. They will wake before dawn, and their first tentative calls will be the signal that the watch is nearing its end. But for now, they sleep, and the trees sleep with them, and the whole valley sleeps under the turning stars. You find yourself thinking about the concept of time, how it feels different here in the darkness than it does during the day. In the sunlight, time moves in a straight line, marked by the progress of shadows across the courtyard and the regular arrival of meals and the changing of the guards. But here, in the deep night, time seems to curve and pull, to slow into a stillness that has no direction. The past and the future feel equally distant, equally unreal, and the only thing that exists is the present moment, this single point of awareness in a vast circle of darkness. You have learned, through many watches, to trust this different kind of time, to let it carry you along without resistance, and you find that it is not an enemy but a friend, a gentle current that bears you toward the dawn without any effort on your part. The older guard said that this is the secret of all long waiting, not to count the hours, but to let the hours become irrelevant, to live in a time that is measured only by the slow turning of the stars and the steady burning of the lamp. The brazier flame flickers once, a small dance of light that draws your eye, and you see that the oil level has dropped slightly since the beginning of the watch, the wick sinking deeper into the bronze bowl. You will need to add more oil before the night is over, but there is still plenty of time, and you file the task away in the back of your mind without urgency. The smaller lamp in the wall niche continues to burn steadily, its flame a perfect miniature of the larger one, and together they create a pool of light that has become the center of your small universe. Beyond the pool, the darkness stretches away in all directions, filled with stone animals and cypress trees and the distant hills. And above it all, the stars continue their slow rotation, the great wheel turning on its invisible axis. You stand at the center of this universe, the guardian of the threshold, and you feel a peace that is as deep and as old as the stars themselves. A new quality enters the air as the night moves toward its coldest point, a subtle change that you sense first, not on your skin, but in the way the lamplight seems to soften at its edges, the sharp boundary between flame and darkness becoming slightly blurred. You have been standing so still for so long that your senses have grown unusually receptive, tuned to the smallest variations in the texture of the night, and this new softness registers as clearly as a spoken word. The air is gathering moisture, drawing water from the cooling earth and the distant river, and the respiration of the cypress trees, holding it in invisible suspension until the temperature drops far enough for the water to reveal itself. You know this process from countless previous watches, but each time it feels like a small miracle, a transformation of the invisible into the visible, the hidden breath of the valley condensing into something that can be seen and felt. The first sign of the dew appears on the grass of the tomb mound, which has been a dark, featureless slope all through the deep hours of the night. Now, as you turn your gaze toward it, you notice that the tips of the grass blades are beginning to catch the starlight in a new way, each one developing a tiny silver point that was not there before. The effect is very faint at first, a mere suspicion of sparkle that might be a trick of tired eyes. But as you watch, it grows more distinct, the silver points multiplying and brightening until the whole surface of the mound glimmers with a soft, scattered light. The dew has arrived, settling on the grass in droplets so small that each one is nearly invisible, but together they form a veil of moisture that transforms the dark slope into a field of muted diamonds. The sight holds your attention for a long moment, the quiet beauty of it sinking into your mind without any need for analysis or comment. The flagstones at your feet begin to show the same change, their grey surfaces darkening with a thin film of water that spreads slowly from the edges inward. You watch the dark patches grow, the moisture seeping into the microscopic pores of the stone and changing its color from pale grey to a deeper charcoal, and you notice how the darkness seems to bloom like a slow flower, each patch expanding until it meets its neighbors and the whole courtyard takes on a wet, glistening sheen. The joints between the flagstones, which had been fine silver lines all night where the starlight pooled, now become tiny channels of darker moisture, the water collecting in the slight depressions and reflecting the lamplight in broken golden lines. The stones that were dry and dusty when you first took your position are now cool and slick under the thin soles of your shoes, and you feel the moisture beginning to seep upward through the fabric, a gradual coolness that reaches the skin of your feet with a gentle, persistent touch. The bronze brazier reacts to the dew with a soft hiss, a sound so quiet that you might not have noticed it if the night were not so profoundly still. An occasional droplet of moisture falls from the rim of the bronze bowl onto the hot metal near the flame, and each droplet produces a tiny sizzle, a brief protest of water meeting fire that lasts only a fraction of a heartbeat before the droplet is gone, vanished into steam that rises invisibly into the darkness. You watch the rim of the brazier and see the droplets gathering there, condensing out of the damp air on the cool bronze surface, each one a perfect half-sphere that catches the flame light and holds it for a moment before gravity pulls it downward into the heat. The rhythm of the droplets is irregular, a slow and random music that marks the passage of time without measuring it, and you find yourself listening for each small hiss with a quiet anticipation, a tiny event that punctuates the long stillness. The dew now begins to settle on your own clothing and equipment, and you become aware of it first on the shoulders of your ceremonial robe. The outer layer of cotton is slowly soaking up the moisture, the fabric growing heavier and cooler against your skin, and when you shift your shoulders slightly, you feel the dampness in the way the cloth moves, a slight resistance that was not there when the robe was dry. The sensation is not unpleasant. It is simply another texture of the night, another way that the valley is making its presence known to your body. The shaft of your spear collects the moisture as well, the smooth wood becoming cool and faintly slick under your fingers, and you adjust your grip very slightly to compensate, finding a new purchase on the wood that feels secure. The bronze tip of the spear, which has been a dull gleam all night, now gathers a fine film of water that makes it shine more brightly in the lamplight, each droplet acting as a tiny lens that concentrates the flame into a point of gold. You notice the dew on the stone guardians now, and the effect is both beautiful and slightly uncanny. The carved hollows of the animals' eyes have collected the moisture in small pools, and in the starlight these pools seem to glisten with a liquid life, giving the statues the appearance of weeping. The stone horses have tears of dew running down their carved cheeks, the water following the subtle contours that the sculptor shaped centuries ago, tracing lines that look like the tracks of actual grief. The elephants, with their deep-set eyes, hold larger pools of moisture that catch the light in a steady gleam, a soft shine that seems almost intelligent, as if the great beasts are watching you with a gentle, tearful patience. The camels, their long necks stretched forward, have dew gathered along the ridges of their carved brows, the droplets forming a delicate chain that sparkles when a faint breath of air moves past. The civil officials, standing in their solemn row, have dew on their clasped hands and on the folds of their stone robes, the moisture darkening the stone in streaks that look like the stains of long weeping. You know, of course, that the guardians are not weeping in any real sense, that the dew is simply water condensing out of the air, a physical process as natural as the rising of the moon or the turning of the stars. Yet the image stays with you, a quiet poetry that adds another layer to the already layered night. The stone animals and officials have stood here through heat and cold, through storm and drought, and tonight the valley has gifted them with tears, a brief softness that will evaporate as soon as the sun returns. The cypress trees behind the mound are also touched by the dew, their fine needles collecting the moisture in a different way. Instead of droplets, the cypress needles gather a fine mist that hangs among the foliage like a grey veil, softening the already soft outlines of the trees and making them seem to float above the ground on a cushion of silver fog. The scent of the cypress, which has been a dry, resinous presence in the air all night, now takes on a fresher quality, the moisture releasing volatile oils from the needles and filling the courtyard with a clean, sharp fragrance that reminds you of the scent of a forest after rain. You breathe in deeply, letting the scent fill your lungs, and you feel a small refreshment that cuts through the fatigue of the long watch, a reminder that the night is not only a time of stillness, but also a time of subtle renewal. The cold that has been climbing through your body all night now reaches a kind of plateau, a steady state where the chill is no longer increasing, but simply existing as a constant companion. The addition of the moisture changes the quality of the cold, making it feel more penetrating, a damp chill that settles into your joints and makes your fingers feel slightly stiff around the spear shaft. You flex your free hand, opening and closing the fingers slowly, feeling the slight resistance of the cold muscles and the way the blood returns warmth to the fingertips with each movement. The sensation is a small reminder of your own aliveness, a pulse of warmth in the midst of the cool, wet darkness, and you are grateful for it. You think of the emperor in his jade suit, lying in the perfect dryness of his sealed chamber, protected from the dew and the cold and the turning of the seasons, and the contrast between his dry eternity and your damp, living present strikes you as both profound and ordinary. He is preserved while you are alive, and the moisture on your robe and the chill in your fingers are proofs of that aliveness, small discomforts that are also small gifts. The moonless sky continues to turn overhead, the stars now slightly dimmed by the moisture in the air, their sharp points softened into small patches of haze. The Milky Way, which was so brilliant earlier in the night, now seems to shimmer behind a thin veil, its light diffused by the countless tiny droplets suspended in the atmosphere. The effect is like looking at the sky through a pane of very fine silk, a softening that does not obscure the stars but changes their character, making them seem gentler, more distant, more dreamlike. You tilt your head back again and let your eyes trace the faint outlines of the constellations, the weaving girl and the cowherd, now slightly blurred but still recognizable, their ancient story still legible in the softened light. The dew has touched the sky as well, you realize, or at least it has touched the air through which you see the sky, and the whole universe seems to have been wrapped in a thin blanket of moisture, tucked in for the remainder of the night. You become aware of the sound of the dew, a thing you have never consciously noticed before tonight. It is not a loud sound, not even a distinct sound in the way that the rustling of the cypresses or the hiss of the lamp is distinct. It is more of a texture, a very faint patter that exists at the lowest threshold of hearing, the collective sound of countless tiny droplets settling onto leaves and stones and grass blades. If you hold your breath and listen with your whole attention, you can just detect it, a soft sibilance that seems to come from all directions at once, the night exhaling its gathered moisture onto the waiting earth. The sound is so delicate that it merges with the sound of your own pulse, your own breath, until you cannot tell where the night ends and your body begins. You let the sound wash over you, a gentle static that fills the silence without breaking it, and you feel yourself sinking even deeper into the stillness of the watch. The dew continues to gather as the night progresses, the droplets on the grass growing from tiny points to small spheres, each one now heavy enough to bend the blade of grass it sits on, causing a slight drooping that gives the mound a softer, more rounded appearance. Some of the larger droplets begin to run together, merging into rivulets that trickle very slowly down the grass blades and disappear into the soil, returning the moisture to the earth from which it came. The process is one of endless patience, a slow circulation of water that has been going on since the first night fell on the first valley, and you are witnessing a small part of it, a single night's contribution to the great cycle. The thought fills you with a sense of continuity, a feeling that your watch is connected not only to the human history of the tomb, but to the natural history of the valley, the long story of water and stone and living things that has no beginning and no end. Your robe is now thoroughly damp across the shoulders and upper back, the cotton clinging slightly to your skin in a way that is cool but not uncomfortable. You know from experience that the dampness will dry quickly once the sun rises and the air warms, and the knowledge allows you to accept the sensation without resistance, as simply another part of the watch. The spear shaft is slick with moisture, and you shift your grip again, finding a dry patch of wood near the base where your hand has been resting, the warmth of your palm having kept the dew away. The small lamp in the wall niche has developed a faint halo of mist around its flame, a tiny rainbow that appears and disappears as the moisture in the air shifts and flows. You watch the halo for a while, letting its soft colors calm your mind, and then you return your gaze to the courtyard, to the wet flankstones and the glistening grass and the weeping stone guardians, and you feel a deep and quiet peace settling over you like a second blanket, a warmth that comes not from heat, but from acceptance. The night is slowly moving toward its end, though the dawn is still some hours away, and the dew marks this transition in its own quiet language. The moisture is a gift of the deep night, a blessing of water from the air to the waiting earth, and it will linger until the first warmth of the sun draws it back up into the sky. You are witnessing the last great event of the darkness, the slow, silent fall of the dew, and after this there will be only the gradual lightening of the east and the return of the birds and the end of your watch. But for now the dew continues to gather, the droplets continue to form and merge and fall, and you continue to stand in their midst, the guardian of the tomb and the witness of the night, letting the moisture soak into your robe and your spear and your skin, accepting the gift with the same patience with which it is given. A subtle change begins in the east, so gradual that at first you do not see it as a change at all, but only as a shift in the texture of the darkness, a thinning of its density where the hills meet the sky. The blackness that has filled that quarter of the heavens all night long seems to lose some of its depth, the way a deep pool loses its opacity when a faint light is held above its surface. You watch this new quality for a long moment, your eyes resting on the horizon that has been invisible for so many hours, and you notice that the edge where the hills end and the sky begins is no longer an absolute boundary, but a soft transition, a zone of deep indigo that separates the solid earth from the fading stars. The indigo is so dark that it is almost black, but there is a warmth in it that was not there before, a suggestion of a color that is not gray and not blue, but something new, something that carries the memory of daylight even before the daylight has arrived. The stars in that part of the sky, which have been sharp and bright all through the deep night, now begin to lose their brilliance. You watch the familiar points of light fade one by one, the faintest ones disappearing first, then the brighter ones dimming until they are only ghosts of themselves, pale specks that tremble against the lightning sky and then vanish entirely. The weaving girl constellation, which has been your companion through the long watch, is among the last to go, its 5 stars holding on with a quiet stubbornness before the growing light finally absorbs them. The cowherd on the opposite side of the Milky Way also fades, his 3 bright stars dimming to 2, then to 1, then to nothing. The northern dipper, which hangs lower in the sky, remains visible for a little longer, its pointer stars still guiding the eye toward the North Star. But soon even those steady lights begin to waver and dissolve into the pale indigo wash. The great wheel of the heavens is still turning, you know, but its lights are being extinguished by a greater light that approaches from below the horizon, a light so powerful that it can erase the stars without any effort at all. You feel a corresponding change in your own body, a quiet alertness that begins to stir in your chest and spread outward to your limbs. This is not the sudden jolt of waking from sleep, but a gentle rising of attention, a gradual return to the world of distinct shapes and colors after the long immersion in darkness. Your senses, which are being tuned to the subtle textures of the night, now begin to reach outward toward the coming day, and you find yourself standing a little straighter, your grip on the spear adjusting itself without conscious thought. The fatigue that has been a distant companion through the deep hours does not disappear, but it recedes, becoming less of a presence as your body recognizes that the watch is entering its final phase. You breathe in deeply, the cool, damp air filling your lungs with the taste of dew and cypress, and you feel the oxygen waking up your blood, sending a gentle warmth to your fingers and your face. The first bird call of the morning comes from the cypress grove behind the tomb mound, a tentative 2-note phrase that rises and falls with a questioning tone. It is the voice of a single bird, perhaps the same nightjar that called once in the early darkness and then fell silent, or perhaps a different species altogether, a dawn bird that has sensed the change in the light and decided to announce it to the valley. The call hangs in the still air for a moment, and then another bird answers from further down the slope, a slightly different pitch, a slightly different rhythm, as if the 2 birds are exchanging observations about the state of the sky. The second call triggers a third, this one from the trees near the outer wall, a rapid series of notes that sound like water dripping into a stone basin, and then the whole grove begins to stir with the first tentative conversations of the waking birds. The sounds are still sparse and hesitant, Not yet the full chorus that will greet the sunrise, but they are enough to transform the silence of the courtyard, to replace the deep stillness of the night with a new kind of quiet, a quiet that is filled with the promise of activity, the anticipation of life returning to the valley. As the birds continue their slow, intermittent calling, you become aware of another sound that the deeper night had hidden, the distant rush of the river. The river has been flowing all night, of course, its waters moving steadily through the valley bottom, but the profound silence of the deep hours had muffled it, drawn a curtain of stillness over its voice. Now, with the first stirring of the dawn, the river's sound begins to re-emerge, a low, continuous murmur that reaches your ears as a gentle background texture, a soft roar that is more felt than heard. The sound is soothing in its constancy, a reminder that the world has been in motion even while you stood motionless, that the water has been traveling toward the distant sea all through the darkness without any need for your attention. You listen to the river for a while, letting its sound wash over you, and you find that it pairs well with the bird calls, the two sounds together creating a quiet harmony that seems to welcome the approaching light. The first cool draught of wind before dawn stirs the cypress trees, a gentle breath that moves through the grove with more purpose than the earlier breeze of the deep night. This is not the soft, playful wind that came and went in pulses. It is a steady, directional flow, a current of air that the rising sun is already beginning to draw across the valley. The wind carries a new scent, a fresh, green smell that comes from the damp grass and the moistened leaves, and it also carries a faint warmth, the first hint of the heat that will grow as the day progresses. The lamp flames flicker in the draught, their steady golden tongues dancing for a moment before settling back into their familiar shape, and you watch the shadows on the sealed door shift and resettle, the carved dragons seeming to ripple with a brief life. The wind touches your face, cooler on your damp cheeks, and you close your eyes for a moment, letting it wash away the last traces of the night's deep cold. The color of the sky continues to change as you watch, the indigo at the horizon now lightening to a soft gray, then to a pale pearl that spreads outward like water soaking into silk. The gray is not a uniform color, but a gradient, darker where it meets the hills, and lighter where it reaches up toward the fading stars, and within the gray there are hints of other colors that are just beginning to emerge, a faint lavender near the eastern ridge, a subtle pink that tints the undersides of the few clouds that have appeared, a pale gold that gathers along the horizon line and intensifies with each passing moment. The colors are so delicate that they seem to be made of the dew itself, a watercolor wash painted across the sky by a hand that is infinitely patient and infinitely gentle. You have seen many dawns from this courtyard, but each one feels new, a gift that the night gives to the day, and you accept this one with the same quiet gratitude that you have learned to feel for all the small events of the watch. The tomb mound, which has been a dark shape all night, now begins to emerge from the receding darkness, its outline becoming solid and distinct. The grass on its slopes, which you have known only as a velvety black surface with glinting dew points, now reveals its true color, a soft green that seems almost luminous in the early light. The dew on the grass blades catches the growing brightness and transforms the slope into a field of tiny mirrors, each droplet reflecting a miniature image of the brightening sky, so that the whole mound shimmers with a cool, silver-green light. The sealed door at the base of the mound also regains its details, the carved guardian figures emerging from the flat darkness that had hidden them, their faces and robes and weapons becoming visible, one feature at a time. First you see the outline of the dragons, their coiled bodies tracing a path across the stone lintel. Then you see the clouds that surround them, the swirling patterns that the sculptor made to represent the emperor's journey through the heavens. Then you see the faces of the guardian deities, their fierce expressions softened by the gentle light, their stone eyes seeming to open after a long sleep. The door is no longer a black rectangle but a rich grey surface filled with intricate carvings, a work of art that has been waiting all night to be seen again. The stone guardians along the spirit path also begin to regain their features, the darkness releasing them one by one as the light grows stronger. The horses, which had been dark silhouettes with only faint starlight on their backs, now show the smooth curves of their carved manes and the gentle swell of their chests, their stone coats taking on a warm grey colour that reminds you of the colour of a real horse's hide. The elephants emerge from their shadows, their massive heads and curling trunks becoming solid and heavy again, the fine cracks on their stone hides now visible as delicate lines that trace the contours of their bodies. The camels, with their long necks and folded legs, regain the details of their carved harnesses. The tiny bells and tassels that the sculptor added so many centuries ago, now sharp and clear in the morning light. The civil officials stand in their row, their solemn faces now distinct, their clasped hands and flowing robes showing every fold and crease, their patient expressions revealing a quiet dignity that the night had hidden. You look at each of these guardians in turn, greeting them as old friends who have shared the vigil with you, and you feel a sense of completion, as if the watch has brought you into a deeper relationship with these stone companions than you have ever felt before. The color of the sky continues to warm, the pale gold at the horizon now intensifying to a rich amber that spreads upward and outward, painting the undersides of the clouds with shades of copper and rose. The few high clouds that have appeared are thin and wispy, the kind of clouds that the older god called mare's tails, and they catch the light in streaks of pink and orange that stretch across the sky like banners announcing the arrival of the sun. The amber light reaches the courtyard now, touching the flagstones with a warm glow that makes the wet surfaces shine like polished metal, and you see the puddles of dew reflecting the brightening sky, each one a small mirror that holds a fragment of the dawn. The lamplight, which has been your constant companion through the night, now begins to grow pale and thin, the golden flame becoming translucent and ghostly as the daylight overpowers it. The flames are still burning, but they are no longer the source of light in the courtyard. They are now small, flickering presences that seem to belong to another time, relics of the darkness that is rapidly retreating. The everyday heroes who begins to rise very slowly at first, but with a steady persistence that you feel on your cheeks and the backs of your hands. The dampness on your robe is still present, but it no longer carries the penetrating chill of the deep night. Instead, it feels almost pleasant, a cool layer that will soon evaporate as the sun climbs higher. The scent of the cypress trees, which was sharp and fresh with the dew, now begins to warm and deepen, taking on a resinous quality that reminds you of incense burning in a temple. The earth smell of the mound also changes, the moist, cool soil releasing a richer, more complex fragrance as it warms, a smell of roots and minerals and the slow decay of ancient leaves. All the scents of the valley are awakening now, stirred by the rising warmth and the gentle wind, and they blend together into a single perfume that fills the courtyard with the unmistakable smell of morning. You become aware of more birds joining the chorus, their calls growing more frequent and more varied as the light increases. The tentative two-note phrases of the earlier singer have now been joined by trills and warbles and rapid chattering, a layered tapestry of sound that rises from every part of the grove and spreads out across the valley. You hear the clear, descending song of a thrush, the insistent chirping of sparrows, the distant caw of a crow flying high above the hills, and underneath all of these, the soft cooing of doves that have nested in the eaves of the outer gatehouse. The bird sounds are no longer hesitant. They are confident and full, a celebration of the returning sun that has been performed every morning since long before the tomb was built and will be performed every morning long after you are gone. You let the chorus wash over you, a joyful noise that does not disturb the peace of the courtyard, but rather completes it, adding the final layer to the quiet symphony of the dawn. Your own alertness continues to grow, and you feel a gentle anticipation settling into your chest. Not an urgent desire for the watch to end, but a quiet readiness for what comes next. You know that the new guard will arrive soon, walking up the spirit path with his spear resting on his shoulder, just as you did so many hours ago, and you will hand over the watch and make your way back down the valley to your own bed. The thought is pleasant, but it does not pull you out of the present moment. You are still here, still standing at the threshold of the tomb, still witnessing the slow return of color and light to the world. The anticipation is like the anticipation of the birds, a natural response to the approaching sun, and you let it be, without clinging to it, just as you let the darkness be, just as you let the dew be, just as you let every part of this long watch be exactly what it was. The eastern sky is now a brilliant sheet of gold, so bright that you can no longer look directly at it, and you know that the sun itself is just below the horizon, a mere finger's width from breaking free of the hills. The first direct rays are already touching the highest clouds, turning them from pink to white-hot silver, and the whole valley is bathed in a warm golden light that seems to flow like a liquid across the grass and the stones and the trees. The shadows, which have been soft and diffuse, now sharpen and lengthen, the stone guardians casting long dark shapes across the flagstones toward the west. Your own shadow stretches out behind you, a tall dark figure with a spear, and you glance at it briefly, a quiet acknowledgement of your own presence in this landscape. The sealed door is now fully illuminated, every detail of its carvings visible in the clear morning light, the dragons and clouds and guardian deities standing out with a sharpness that makes them seem almost alive. The tomb mound glows green and gold, the dew still sparkling on the grass, and the whole courtyard is transformed from a place of darkness and mystery into a place of beauty and peace, a monument that is as much a part of the living world as it is a gateway to the world of the ancestors. The color has fully returned now, painting the valley in shades of green and gold and grey and blue, and you stand at the center of it all, the last guardian of the night watch, watching the world come back to life. The lamps still burn beside the door, their flames now entirely invisible in the bright daylight, and you know that soon you will extinguish them and let the sun take over the duty of illuminating the tomb. But for now, you let them burn a little longer, a small continuity between the darkness and the light, a thread of fire that has connected the hours of the night to the hours of the day. The watch is almost over, but you are still here, still present, still witnessing the slow miracle of the dawn, and you feel a quiet completeness, a sense that you have done what you came to do, and that the night has accepted your offering of stillness and patience. The sun is about to rise, and you are ready. The sky continues its slow transformation, the brilliant gold at the horizon softening to a clear pale yellow that spreads upward and outward until it fills the entire eastern quarter of the heavens. The few clouds that caught the first direct rays have now lost their fiery edges and become ordinary white puffs, small and harmless, drifting slowly across the blue that is beginning to assert itself overhead. The deep indigo of the night sky has retreated to the west, a narrow band of darkness that clings to the distant hills like a shadow reluctant to leave, but even that is fading as you watch, thinning to a pale grey and then to nothing, absorbed into the universal brightness of the day. The stars are all gone now, every single one, and the sky has become a clean, open expanse, a vast dome of pale blue that arches over the valley without a single interruption. The Milky Way, which was so vivid just a few hours ago, is now a memory. Its river of stars vanished as completely as if it had never existed. And you feel a quiet wonder at the completeness of the transition, the way the night can give way to the day so thoroughly that no trace of the darkness remains. The tomb mound reveals its true color in the full light of the morning, a soft, living green that seems to glow from within. The grass on its slopes, which you have known only as a dark shape or a field of silver dew points, now shows itself as a thick, healthy carpet of many individual blades, each one a slightly different shade of green, from pale emerald near the base to deep olive, where the shadows of the crest fall. The dew is still present, but it is already beginning to evaporate, the droplets shrinking as the sun's warmth reaches them, and a faint mist rises from the grass, a delicate veil of moisture that hovers just above the surface and then disperses into the warming air. The mound no longer looks like a mysterious monument of the night. It looks like a gentle hill, a peaceful piece of the natural landscape that happens to contain an emperor's tomb, and the contrast between its daytime ordinariness and its nighttime majesty strikes you as both surprising and perfectly right. The sealed door at the base of the mound, which you have guarded all night, now stands in full sunlight, its carved details so sharp and clear that you can see every chisel mark the ancient craftsman left on the stone. The coiled dragons on the lintel are revealed as intricate works of art, their scales and claws and flowing whiskers carved with a precision that you never fully appreciated during your daytime walks past the tomb. The cloud patterns that surround them are equally detailed, each swirl and spiral contributing to a sense of motion that makes the stone seem almost liquid. The guardian deities on the side panels have fierce but serene faces, their eyes wide open, their mouths set in expressions of calm authority, and their weapons and armor are rendered with a realism that makes them seem ready to step off the stone and take up their posts beside you. The door, which was a black rectangle and then a faintly visible relief, is now a masterpiece of sculpture, and you feel a quiet pride in having been its guardian through the long hours of darkness. Your 2 lamps continue to burn, one in the brazier and one in the wall niche, but their flames are now entirely invisible in the bright daylight. You can see the faint shimmer of heat rising from the bronze bowls, and you can smell the warm oil and the faint smoke of the wicks, but the flames themselves have become transparent, ghostly presences that have no power against the sun. You know that it is time to extinguish them, and you move slowly, your body still heavy with the stillness of the long watch, to kneel beside the brazier. You lift the bronze snuffer from its hook, a simple tool shaped like a small cup on a long handle, and you lower it carefully over the main flame, watching the glow disappear as the metal cup cuts off the air. A thin wisp of smoke rises from the snuffed wick, curling upward and then vanishing into the morning breeze, and the smell of extinguished oil fills the air for a moment, a sharp, slightly bitter scent that speaks of endings. You move to the wall niche and snuff the smaller lamp in the same way, watching the smoke rise and dissolve, and then you replace the snuffer on its hook and stand back, surveying the now unlit brazier and the silent niche. The lamps have served you well through the night, their steady light a constant companion, and you feel a quiet gratitude toward them as you leave them to cool in the morning air. You hear footsteps on the spirit path, the sound of cloth shoes on stone, a rhythm that you know well from countless previous changes of the watch. You turn your head slowly, your neck moving with the deliberate care of one who has been still for many hours, and you see the new guard approaching from the direction of the outer gate. His silhouette is familiar, his ceremonial robe identical to yours, his spear resting on his shoulder at the same angle that yours has held all night. He walks with the same steady pace that you walked when you first arrived in the evening, and his face, as it comes into clearer view, shows the calm, rested expression of a man who has slept through the darkness and is now ready to take up his duty. You watch him approach without moving from your position, and you feel a quiet sense of completion, a recognition that the watch is passing from one guardian to the next in a chain that has remained unbroken for centuries. The new guard reaches the edge of the lamplight, though the lamplight is now invisible, and he stops a few paces away from you, his spear lowering to the ground in a mirror of your own stance. You exchange a quiet nod, a gesture that contains no words, but communicates everything that needs to be said. The watch has been kept, the night has passed peacefully, the Emperor still sleeps undisturbed behind his sealed door. The nod carries the weight of tradition, the same nod that you've exchanged with this guard many times before, the same nod that the older guard exchanged with you when you were new to the duty, the same nod that guards exchanged generations ago when the tomb was younger and the carvings were sharper. You feel the continuity of this gesture, its place in the long history of the tomb, and you are grateful to be part of it. You reach into the fold of your robe and withdraw the bronze key that opens the small box where the lamp oil and wicks and snuffer are stored. The key is simple and heavy, its surface worn smooth by the hands of many guards, and you hold it out to the new guard, placing it in his open palm. His fingers close around it, and he gives a second small nod, an acknowledgement of the transfer of responsibility. You do not speak, words are not necessary in this moment, and the silence of the courtyard feels too sacred to break with casual talk. The new guard steps past you and takes up his position just to the left of the sealed door, exactly where you stood all night, his feet finding the same worn spot on the flagstones, his spear settling into the same angle against his shoulder, his body adjusting to the same posture of patient waiting. You watch him for a moment, seeing yourself in his stance, and then you turn away and begin your walk back down the spirit path. The stone guardians are now fully visible in the morning light, their long rows stretching away toward the outer gate, and you see them with the clarity that the night denied you. The horses stand with their heads lowered, their carved manes catching the sunlight and showing the delicate lines that the sculptor incised to represent individual hairs. The chipped ear of the nearest lion, which you came to know so well in the darkness, now reveals itself as a small but distinct irregularity, a mark of age that gives the statue a personality all its own. The elephants, so heavy and dark during the night, now glow with a warm grey colour, their stone hides showing the fine cracks and patches of lichen that testify to their centuries of patient waiting. The camels kneel in their eternal rest, their carved harnesses clearly visible, each tiny bell and tassel distinct in the crisp morning light. The civil officials stand at the far end of the path, their stone robes flowing in frozen folds, their clasped hands and solemn faces now fully revealed, and you can see the worn places on their sleeves where centuries of rain have smoothed the stone to a soft polish. You walk past each pair of guardians slowly, your pace unhurried, and you feel as if you are saying goodbye to old friends who have shared the long vigil with you. They will still be here when you return tonight, of course, standing in the same positions, keeping their eternal watch, and you will see them again in the evening when you walk back to the tomb. But for now, in the morning light, you acknowledge them with a quiet gratitude, a silent thanks for their companionship through the darkness. The sun has now risen fully above the eastern hills, and its warmth reaches you as you walk, a gentle heat that settles on your shoulders and the back of your neck. The dampness in your robe is already beginning to dry, the moisture evaporating into the warming air, and you feel the fabric growing lighter and softer against your skin. The chill that settled into your bones during the deep hours of the night is now fading, replaced by a pleasant warmth that spreads through your body with every step. You tilt your head back slightly and let the sun touch your face, closing your eyes for a moment to feel the brightness through your eyelids, a red-gold glow that is as comforting as a blanket. When you open your eyes again, the world seems even more vivid, the colors richer, the outlines sharper, and you feel a deep sense of well-being that comes from having completed your duty and received the gift of the new day. You reach the end of the spirit path, where the stone guardians give way to the open ground that leads to the outer gate, and you pause for a moment to look back at the tomb mound. The sun is now touching the very top of the grassy slope, a bright golden patch that stands out against the soft green of the rest of the mound, and the light seems to be spreading downward, slowly claiming the entire hill. You feel the warmth on your back like a hand giving thanks, a quiet benediction from the sun itself, and you accept it with the same patience with which you accepted the darkness and the cold and the dew. The sealed door glows in the sunlight, the carved dragons and guardians now so bright that they seem to be made of light rather than stone, and the new guard standing beside it is a small, steady figure, already settling into the stillness of his watch. The lamps are dark, the courtyard is peaceful, and the tomb is once again a place of quiet beauty, waiting for the night to return. You turn away from the tomb and continue your walk through the outer gate, following the path that leads down through the cypress grove and out into the wider valley. The birds are singing in full chorus now, their songs filling the air with a joyful noise that seems to celebrate the end of your watch and the beginning of a new day. The river is clearly audible, its waters rushing over the stones with a bright, clean sound, and you can smell the fresh green scent of the fields that lie between the tomb and the village. The world is waking up all around you, the farmers already at work in their terraced fields, the potters lighting their kilns, the children chasing chickens through the lanes, and you are walking back to your own small room to rest until the evening calls you back to the tomb. The sleep that awaits you will be deep and dreamless, a restoration of the energy you gave to the night, and you look forward to it with a quiet pleasure. As you walk, you think about the night that has just passed, the long hours of stillness and silence, the slow turning of the stars, the gentle visit of the breeze, the gathering of the dew, the distant lamp in the village, the first bird calls of the dawn. Each moment was a small gift, a piece of the great mosaic of the watch, and together they formed a whole that was greater than the sum of its parts. You have done your duty, not with drama or heroism, but with simple patience, and the night has accepted your offering. The Emperor sleeps in his jade chamber, the tomb stands undisturbed, and the chain of guardians remains unbroken. Tonight you will walk the spirit path again. Light the lamps and take up your position beside the sealed door, and the night will unfold in its own quiet rhythm, just as it did tonight, and just as it will for all the nights to come. But for now, the sun is warm on your back, the birds are singing, and the day stretches ahead of you with all its ordinary comforts. You are no longer the guardian of the tomb. You are simply a person walking home, and that is enough. The stone animals stand in their long rows behind you, unchanged and patient, and the tomb settles into its daylight silence, ready for the next night's watch.